what defenses are going to do to the Bengals is going to be very intriguing for me, because I've been fascinated by the Joe Burrow deep pass, like pretty much since he came into the league, right? Because he doesn't have the strongest arm. And I think like that was, if there was one knock on him, like he doesn't have a rocket. He's not Justin Herbert in that area. But he was, so accurate in college, it really didn't matter. But we kind of saw that not be a thing that he was able to take advantage of during his rookie year. And maybe some of that was, coming off injury, wasn't really able to plant, but like he was not a good deep passer in his first year. Everything was, the only like completions he could do was back shoulder. He didn't really have that touch to like place the ball over like in front of receivers, and there were no yards after the catch on some of those deep passes. Everything was back shoulder, and some of that was the 2020 version of AJ Green, which was just not very good in general and wouldn't have helped any quarterback. But there was a lot of struggles in the deep passing, and then last year, man, just like from week one, it was just like bombs away. And it was accurate. He was able to place the ball exactly where it needed to. Like even in like there was this middle section of the year where they struggled a little bit in deep passing. But like the process was still there. The passes were still accurate. That was some of like the Jamar Chase drop things that like actually popped up during the season. But it was a lot of like when the Bengals saw single high coverage, like Burrow was just, he was letting it rip to the outside, and like it was the F it Mars down there somewhere. It worked out with T Higgins too, who became a really good deep receiver. I'm very interested to see like whether defenses are going to actually, do the too high, right? Like whether, it's talked about the difference between the too high pre-snap and too high post-snap. When it was too high post-snap, Joe Burrow's ADOT went down like 2 yards. It went from one of the highest against single coverage or single high to kind of the middle of the pack ish, around like 7 yards when he actually saw like too high coverage. So that was the bit. And against empty too. Like we've talked about how the Bengals were one of the highest teams that went empty, and that was a way to kind of one, let Burrow dictate what was going on. But when there was single high, Burrow had an 8.96 ADOT from empty and 0.11 EPA per dropback against too high, 4.92 ADOT and negative 0.07 EPA per dropback from empty. So like that's a completely different quarterback and a completely different offense. So I think the Bengals know they're probably going to get some more too high, but what they actually do and what happens in practice, I'm fascinated to see, because this is an offense that, like we've talked about it a lot, was not really, that great at, the down to down consistency. And this was an offense that relied heavily on big plays. And if defenses are going to sell out to stop those big plays, like how patient are the Bengals going to be with some of those other things? How does that just transform what this offense can be? Does it cap some of the upside if they're not, shooting for, Jamar Chase deep passes all the time? So how that offense manages to figure out what defenses are trying to do, and for the most part, like what I started with, like what defenses are going to do to the Bengals, I think is going to be super fascinating.
Yeah, and for me, the biggest thing too is, a lot of people have talked about the offensive line and protecting Burrow, because when he wasn't sacked, they were second in the NFL in touchdown rate per drive on drives where he wasn't sacked. But also for the run game, paired with the marriage of what you said. I mean, this offensive line now is just so much better in terms of where Joe Mixon's going to get yards before contact. And last year, he was already number one in the NFL in carries with 3 or more wide receivers on the field by product of the system that we, have talked about. Right. He was 4th in the NFL in carries with 6 or fewer defenders in the box. But he was second to last in yards before contact on those carries with just 6 or fewer defenders in the box that had 50 or more carries in the NFL last year. That's going to be a big difference this year. If you're going to go too high, and now that the upgrades that this offensive line has, like this is going to be a better team, like said, like almost like we talked about the Chiefs earlier, like to be able to get some more of that downhill running game going on you to maybe get you out of that. The Bengals have, a better kind of personnel in place than what like the Chiefs did with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Like having a guy like Joe Mixon can threaten the defense in that way. So having a guy that talented, I wish they would have grabbed Dulcich in or a tight end that I believed in to help alleviate some of those concerns
Right.
as well. But hey, Hayden Hurst is going to make some plays, man. Former first round pick. We're going to have to try to believe. But yeah, I look at it from like the rushing angle, and I'm like I think the Bengals are built to, if teams want to invite that, like they can run the football a lot better than they did last year, as opposed to like a team like the Steelers that like struggled to run the football against light boxes. Like they don't look any better on paper set up to like combat that. But I look at the Bengals situation, I absolutely see a scenario where they've kind of built out to where they can help themselves in pass protection, but also, move some bodies around if teams want to sit back in that high coverage against them.
Yeah, it's just it's a what another fascinating cat and mouse type of thing, and I think like they are one of the offenses like the Chiefs, where it's going to be if defenses actually want to use the too high coverages. And I think like that is actually that stops the most dangerous part of the passing offense. So just like you said, and if the running game doesn't work, like how did they adapt to that? I just think like because we're not totally sold on Zach Taylor. Like we've had that conversation a couple of times. So like how all of that, you know, just how they adapt, how they evolve throughout the season. Is like one of the interesting things to watch. Like I think we talked about, like we don't necessarily believe the Bengals are making the playoffs just because of like some things working against them. So like how that evolves, I think is like this is just like one of the biggest open-ended questions I think just of the season, because I think like there's like a lot of other things like we kind of know, but I think like when I like picture what this Bengals offense is going to be, it's still like we know what they do well, but whether that's going to be able to translate and whether that's going to really be hindered by what defenses are doing to stop it, I think that's one of the more fascinating things of how we head into the season.